Well, let's take a world look at this problem now with Mark Bloomfield, who is the CEO and president of the think tank American Council for Capital Formation. That's based in Washington. Mark Bloomfield is in Washington, D.C. for us now. Thank you very much for joining us. Is the world economy stronger today than it was 2 days ago before the summit?
To be determined. The first factor is whether the financial markets will buy this, and we don't know. The second factor is whether there's substance to this proposal. Yes, it is true that $1.1 trillion is due from the sovereign debt countries in Europe, about 500 billion euros due also in the first half of 2012. And the question is whether the loans and the lower interest rates will provide that liquidity for those banks to pay those debts. Added to that, of course, is whether or not the fiscal demands for balanced budgets will occur. So that's the substance. And the third part is the politics. Query whether the political forces in these governments will approve this or not. Those are our three challenges.
Do you think possibly the political challenge may be even greater than the economic one? Because the economics, the money, the figures, those can be worked out. The politics, slightly cloudier, maybe.
I personally do, and I don't think it's just a European problem. I think most Western democracies today have an extremely difficult time dealing with tough political challenges. And that is, I think, the overview. 9 countries have to go to their parliaments. Who knows what reaction among the population will take place in Germany and France to these changes. So yes, I think it is much more or as much a political question as an economic question.
And then again, taking a much wider look, I've seen that the Reuters news agency has been told by developing countries who in fact have been thinking about possibly lending more money to the International Monetary Fund, that they may rethink that because they're concerned about the IMF giving a whole load of money to Europe, which they're not completely certain would come back. I mean, is that a real threat, do you think?
Oh, I think it's a real threat because basically that additional lending is a short-term fix to long-term structural problems which are not being addressed. For example, I said $1.1 trillion the governments owe, $500 billion the private banks owe. Okay, so they pay that off. But what happens to the long-term and structural balances? That's why I think people should have concerns, and it will be manifested in terms of how the markets react.
Give us a personal opinion about where you think the Eurozone may be in, let's pick 18 months, say 2 years.
I think that this is probably the most serious challenge to Europe, not since World War II, but since the Depression. And I think 2 things will happen. You'll either have political leadership, or if you do not, you'll have a serious market reaction. And we saw on a mini scale what that market reaction was in the United States when we had our financial crisis. So I'm an optimist, but I am extremely worried.
Mark Bloomfield, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.